Welcome to Easy Eats. My name is Chef Yves Dechaine, and today we're in the Greener Village's Learning Kitchen, and we're going to be making shakshuka with the Fredericton Homeless Shelter's ED, Warren Maddox. Welcome, Warren.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Warren, tell us a little bit about the shelters. What's your mission, your vision?
Our mission has changed really over the years, from the original sort of letters patent that we put out back in 40 years ago, that there was the shelters were built really on sort of helping families that have been impacted by floods or fire. And then there was a small mention of transients within it. And boy, has it ever changed.
I would imagine, yeah.
Really what we don't deal really with a whole lot of people that have dealt with floods or fire. That's a different agency now. But where we really do spend an enormous amount of time is working with homeless people. And our role is to get them stable, give them a safe place to be, and start dealing with the issues that brought them into the crisis of homelessness. So we use a model called the continuum, or continuum of care. And what we do is we take that person from the time they're ringing our doorbell, and then really through a series of interventions. And the initial one is, do you really need to be in the shelters? Is there other places that you would be better off? So that's our prevention and diversion component, and everybody goes through that on their way in the shelter, and that takes about 10, 15 minutes. And we're really having a lot of success with that particular program. That our average right now is about 28% of the people that are coming to our door actually have somewhere better that they could go, that they have the supports, that it's a home or a good friend or a cousin or something like that. And in those cases, sometimes it's just a simple matter of they can't get there, like they don't know how to get there. So we eliminate that barrier. We'll buy a taxi, we'll buy a bus ticket, we'll buy an airline ticket, whatever the case is. So we get them back to where they need to be, that's got the proper supports. Then they don't get locked into the cycle of sort of being in the shelter and spinning their wheels and eventually ending up in God knows what, hooked up with meth or something like that. But let's say they've made it through that point, they don't have anywhere to go, then we go through a more robust intake process. We're really trying to figure out who you are. And that's the basic data gathering that happens. And that can be as quick as 35 minutes, and it can be as long as 2 hours, depending on what this person's state is, right? And how much they want to talk and how much they need to get off their chest. Then they go through that, then we sort of give them their bed, assign the bed, get them their bedding, get them settled in, and then we leave them alone for 24 hours or so, and mostly they just sleep. After that, then we start working with our transition planners, and that's the part where we get all the baggage out on the table to figure out what's brought you here, what are we going to run into, how do we deal with the issues that have brought you here so that you can get into housing. So the shelters have really gone from an emergency space, back 20, 30, 40 years ago as a very emergency space and almost a human warehouse, to where we are now, which is a housing-focused shelter. So what we're trying to do is to get people in, get them stabilized, deal with all the issues, and then get them out into housing as quick as we can. And part of that process involves them. So it's not just us saying, well, here's your house.
Well, yeah.
Off to the races.
That's it. I mean, people may not be ready for that kind of transition or change.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that needs to sort of get tidied up.
Yeah.
And it's also trying to figure out what kind of housing do you need. Is it a room? Is it a senior citizens home? Is it a special care home? Is it a one-bedroom house? Are there children involved that you're trying to get them back? So you need 2 or 3 bedrooms. So whatever the scenario is, this is where it all sort of comes out. Do you have MB housing arrears? Do you have MB power arrears? Are there any other issues? Do you have mental health issues that aren't being met? Are there medications that you need that you're not able to afford? And if there are, we buy them. Are there legal issues? Are there addiction issues? All that sort of really gnarly, entangled mess is what we're trying to get squared away. And then we just tick them off one by one. And then that point, our housing support team will come in and start interacting with them as well to build rapport. And then eventually it can be anywhere from 60 to as long as 6 months, 60 days to 6 months. A housing offer will come up that fits their needs and who they are. At that point, they've already met the housing support team. They have a rapport with them. Off into housing they go. We'll provide them with furniture if they need it. And then the housing support team takes over, and initially they'll do a couple of visits a week to make sure everything is going well. Then it'll go down to 1 visit a week, and then it'll go down to 1 visit every 2 weeks, and then it'll go down to 1 visit a month. And then at the end of 12 months, we sort of consider them stable, and that's it. So with the housing support guys, their role is to keep things on the rails. So that whole process is really built on the individual. But there's no steel template that we use.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, you are taking the individual and you're really helping them individually work through everything they need to get to that. And you're saying that that's that's a lot of stuff going on. You must partner up, or your staff. How many people are there to do that?
Our staff right now are around 30.
Okay.
So we tend to partner, like certainly on mental health issues. We partner with mental health and addictions. On addiction issues, we also partner with mental health and addictions. And there's a couple of really brilliant addiction nurses that are out and about that do amazing stuff. The FACT team within mental health and addictions are a brilliant group of people that we work with a lot. So we have our own in-house mental health counselor that has group sessions and one-on-one sessions every week at both shelters. So it's really trying to get these people stabilized, get them to understand that they're safe, and then trying to get them to look outward. And it's a really neat thing that happens sort of within the shelters that I've seen a lot over my over 9 years there, is that when somebody comes in, they tend to be very self-centered. And it's not a criticism, it's just a matter of survival, right? You're on the streets, you're homeless, you all need to be self-centered or you're going to get hurt. So they tend to be that, and then you'll see about 2 weeks in, 2 or 3 weeks in, you'll see that mind shift switch from purely sort of self-survival to, I have opportunities. You know, what's next? What can I do? And you know, you'll see them sort of start figuring it out that these guys are here to help us, and that there's a lot of stuff that I can take advantage of. So they just need to step up. So we're firmly committed that with all of our staff, it's not our journey, it's their journey. The shelters are so much more than just beds and heads, which is what we used to be many moons ago. But now we're an agency that's really focused on getting Billy Bob or Jane or whomever, to move from this crisis point through a series of supports and into housing where they're supported for up to a year, and then they're good to go.
Perfect. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you were talking about misconceptions or old adages like beds and heads, and it's easy to fall into that rut, right? I mean, especially with this climate. I mean, you lose your job. You're a single person living with no family, like you said. Maybe your support's elsewhere. It's easy to fall into those and through those cracks.
Well, the bigger that you fall into a rut,
right?
And trying to get you to pop out of that rut is a challenge, and more so for some people. Some of the abused women that we get in have been incredibly damaged, and it takes a longer runway to work with them to get them, to restore their self-confidence, to restore their ego, to get them to start looking that I can do this. And the biggest issue for us is without question there's two, which is mental health issues and crystal meth, and those two are really hard to deal with.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I know a little bit about the shelters as the former chef of the soup kitchen, and I've noticed that it's just, there's new faces coming in and out all the time, but I'm finding lately that it's just I'm seeing more. And then I think you've answered my question there. Is the drug of choice, or the drug, it has changed in the Fredericton area, hasn't it?
It started probably in about 2018 when we started seeing the switch. When I first started, and I think you were there when I first started.
Yeah.
Or shortly thereafter. But we saw, that initially it was opiates, and I look fondly on those days when it was just opiates.
Yeah.
But now what we've got is this bizarre, evil combination of crystal meth, but they're now starting to cut it with fentanyl, or even worse, carfentanil. So when you've got that combination, your naloxone kits don't really work anymore, because naloxone has no effect whatsoever on crystal meth. So we're running into those situations where, somebody overdoses, it's really hard to get them out of it.
So is it scarier to be the person spending the night at the shelter watching over these fellas?
Inside things are still stable and chill, because we're a damp shelter, so we don't let drugs in. The advent of crystal meth, we've also seen the violence increase dramatically. So 40 years in the business, and it's only been in the last 6-7 months that we've really had to start talking about security. Which is disappointing. 40 years of never having to talk about it. Now we're trying to get our heads around what does security look like, and how do we do that, and how do we not become an institutional
or
type
a
thing.
prison ward,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
So we don't want to traumatize people that are already sort of traumatized anyway. So that's something that we've been really struggling with.
We'll talk more about the a couple of those new initiatives while we make some shakshuka. So we'll be back after these few messages to make some shakshuka and talk more about projects going on at the homeless shelter. Welcome back to Easy Eats. Again, I'm in the Greener Villages Learning Kitchen with Warren Maddox, Executive Director of the Fredericton Homeless Shelters, and we're going to be making shakshuka. So shakshuka is a really warm and comforting food. It's a great brunch or breakfast for dinner. It's really easy, and again, it's stuff that you could get in the box here at the Greener Village really, really easily. So we'll start this out. All you need is about a tablespoon of olive oil in the pan, and you just let that warm up a little. Just move that around. And then I've preheated the pan so it'll go a little bit quicker, but yeah, usually you want to get your pan nice and warm. And then to that, I'm going to add my onions and our peppers. And we're just going to cook those down for a few minutes while we talk about maybe some of the, you talked about the out of the cold shelters. Now that's seasonal, of course.
Yep.
And how long has that been running? Because I know that wasn't something that was happening when I was working down that area.
This will be our third year of running it. Before that, there was a couple of trial runs at different locations. So we got involved, I say 3 years ago, just sort of as an agency that we were asked to do it by the city, and my buddy John Howard sort of twisted my arm into it. Cost him a whole beer to do so.
Okay.
It was a good investment by him.
Yeah.
So we set out, and then sort of working with the city, we decided that the Small Craft Aquatic Center had what we needed in terms of the facility, showers, washrooms, and an adequate space to put 10 cots in. So it was a good and sort of normal move. So we'll run that mid-December to mid-April, and that's really just at that point we're not looking at what we do at the main shelters in terms of intervention and stuff. This one is really sort of doing the initial contacts, trying to get some data on the individuals, figuring out who's there, and then giving them a gentle nudge toward the main shelters.
So these are focused for fellas that really not enjoy, but would rather live rough than have to.
In some cases, in some cases, there's individuals that have been, barred from Oak Center or our center.
Okay.
For one reason or another, and we're sort of waiting for them to sort of figure it out that you can't do this kind of behavior. This is smelling really good.
It is.
So where's this from? Is this from Tunisia or?
It is. It's a Northern African, Middle Eastern. I learned about this dish when I first started here. We had a gentleman working with us who was Egyptian, and he said that this is what his family used to make for I would say so. He told me Sunday. Probably more like to explain that when family got together, this is what was put on the table for family gatherings at breakfast. So kind of a brunch thing. So to this, we're going to add a little bit of garlic.
You gotta have garlic.
We have to have garlic. So a couple of cloves of garlic in there, and we're just going to mix it around till it gets fragrant. And then once it gets fragrant, we're just going to add our spices. So to that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of paprika.
Are you doing the smoked paprika or regular paprika?
It's a sweet paprika, but it's whatever you have in the pantry, really.
It's a nice flavor.
It is, absolutely. A little bit of cumin, about a teaspoon.
Big flavor.
Big flavor. A little goes a long way.
Yeah.
That's why we're only putting a teaspoon in here. And it's really kind of the quintessential identity of the dish.
Yep.
And then you can use ground cumin, or not cumin, or cardamom, or I have these cardamom seeds. So we just toss those in there. And
Also
again,
a big flavor.
it is. And then we're just going to mix this around, and you're going to see till everything gets a little bit dark. And
So
then
with this, you've got a really sweet flavor on the go.
a really sweet, earthy flavor is exactly what we're looking for, yeah. And it's going to balance out the acidity of the tomato, right?
Yep.
So speaking of tomato, we're just going to grab some canned stewed tomatoes and just toss that in there just like that. And now we're just going to let this poach a little bit, so you can stew this down as much as you want. No more than about 15-20 minutes if you want to, but now is pretty much ready. So what we're going to do now is I've got 4 eggs right here, so I'm just going to make 4 little pockets right like this, and then we're simply just going to crack the eggs right into their little nests like this. There we are.
You're all fancy with the one-handed
With the
cracking.
one hand, well, yeah, I mean, I've cracked cases upon cases. Now, why not show that skill off, right? And all we're going to do now is I'm going to season with a little bit of pepper.
Gotta have some pepper.
Got to have a little bit of pepper, even though we've got paprika in there. You want to
No, you need a little bit of pepper.
And then we're going to hit it up with just a little bit of salt, just like this. And then we're going to cover this for a little bit. And then, so what kind of challenges? I mean, there's always challenges and stuff, but what are the biggest challenges you guys are facing as the shelters right now, other than the obvious, the meth or the drugs that
Yeah,
come in?
I mean, we're always, because we're a private nonprofit, that we're always, sort of looking for money and
Yeah.
financial support. And we can, like you guys or the community kitchen or anybody, we can stretch a penny farther than anybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're always sort of looking for that and being able to leverage any of the funds that come in. And we've got, some wonderful stories from, we had a couple of young Frederictonians come in, I guess maybe about a month and a half ago, and they ran a tiki lemon stand over there in the summer. Like you're this old, I don't know how old, but that old and that old. So, they ran their tiki lemon stand and they brought the money in and donated to us, and it was great. It's wonderful to have those stories. But it's everybody from, that little kid to the foundations to government support to the individuals that are taking part in our Christmas mail out. All that funds go to make sure that, we're doing as much as we can. And we're helping something in the area of 350 people a year, come in, get stable, find a better path in life, find a healthier path in life. When you get one-bedroom apartments, I saw some yesterday that we were looking at online, and they're $1,700 for a one-bedroom apartment. You're like, I couldn't afford that.
All right, so these eggs are pretty much poached. You can poach them to the doneness you want. And then, so this is a pretty heavy tasting dish. There's no real lightness or brightness to it.
Yep.
So a lot of times what I'll do is we'll add a little bit of cilantro and feta to it. So all I'm going to do is just chop some of this up right here. We'll sprinkle a little bit of that over top, save a little bit for plating, and then grab a little bit of feta again and just work that around. And then we'll kind of let that simmer and go for a little bit, and we'll see you right after this short break. Welcome back to Easy Eats. Again, we are in the Greener Villages Learning Kitchen with Warren Maddox, Executive Director of the Fredericton Homeless Shelters. So we've just finished the shakshuka, and it's ready to be plated. So all you're going to do now is just find that lovely poached egg in there, toss it in, and then just grab some of this lovely stew. And you eat it with some crusty bread, some pita, toast if that's all you have, just like that. And I'll pass that on to you.
Perfect.
And then you let me know what you think.
Well, this is an amazingly versatile dish. The spices you use today, I mean, you could play with this in 99 ways from Sunday.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to lean towards like a Texas chili style, then you put in that a little bit of smoke, a little bit of chili powder, and if you wanted to brighten it up and kind of go with an Asian feel, like you could switch it up and make it fit your style, or even better yet, whatever, when you open up your cupboard door, whatever you see in the cupboard works.
I mean, it could go Provençal with herbs de Provence, or it could go curry.
Absolutely,
there's a lot of different ways.
You can definitely travel the world with this, for sure.
That's good.
That's nice. Yeah, it's warm and it's comforting, and
I love poached eggs, so this is really good.
So how does one get involved as a volunteer with the homeless shelters, or do you take volunteers at the shelter?
We don't use a lot of volunteers, mostly because our continuum model is very much staff-based and close interaction with the residents. We do use volunteers on certain events and for certain sort of peripheral stuff. Certainly you guys here at Greener Village or Macto, the community kitchen, use a lot of volunteers. So we tend to sort of direct people that way to do it. But we do use a few, and we're looking at trying to integrate a bigger volunteer-based program. But the really hard, cold business reality is volunteers are a liability, insurance-wise. So when we're dealing with volunteers and we're dealing with some of the population that we do, they're exactly the same as employees in the eyes of WorkSafe MB. So there has to be a lot of training, a lot of work in that regard. So we tend to use volunteers, to help with our donations, to help with cleanups, to do painting at the different spaces that we own. It's an easier split for us, but certainly in terms of the other agencies that are out there in the world, volunteerism is critical to their survival, and we try to send people that way as much as we can.
So if you do want to support and you want to make a donation, how do you go about it other than just coming up and knocking on the door or ringing the bell? Yeah.
There's a lot of ways, and we follow a very standard old business model, which is we make it as easy as possible for people to do business with us. So we have an online component through Canada Helps, and you can go on our website and there's a donate here page or donate here link on every page. There's currently a Christmas mailer going out, so we'll take, if you want to call in a credit card, that works. If you want to send us a check, that works. We get people doing little fundraisers for us. St. Thomas Women's Hockey did a fundraiser for us last week, did a 50-50 thing and just brought in a sort of a wad of cash to us. We get stock transfers. We make it as easy as possible for people to do it, and we're fairly successful that way. So it's a matter of picking up the phone, ringing the doorbell, or clicking online, either way.
Thank you for sharing a little bit more about the shelters. I've been associated with the shelters, working at the community kitchen and then working here. But I mean, you opened my eyes. There's a lot more going on other than the beds right beside the kitchens and Grace House. Yeah. So it's great to know a little bit more, and it's great to let the community know the support that you guys are giving the other members of the community who really don't have that support, and it's nice to know that we're taking them as individuals and we're supporting the individual. It isn't a cookie cutter system. No. So people aren't if they're falling through the cracks, you guys are the ones that are kind of scooping them up and checking in those cracks to making sure that everyone gets a fair shake.
Yeah,
and I really appreciate that. That's great.
There's a lot of talk about how do we solve the problem that exists in the community, and I think there's times when people get overwhelmed, and I remind them that there's an old saying, which is, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And the way we look at the world is, we will get this problem solved, but it's going to take time, patience, compassion, and persistence, and we'll get it. And with agencies like Greener Village and Ormocto and Community Kitchen, us, John Howard, it's going to take a lot of people, but we'll get there.
So any future plans for the shelters? Anything that you can discuss?
There's always plans. So yeah, I mean, part of our progression is really looking at more transitional housing. We bought 2 apartment buildings last year. We'll more than likely buy one next year. So really for us, it's continued growth, continue to work on and evolve the model that we have, and to get people out of crisis and get them into housing. That's why we're here.
Well, thanks a lot for sharing this with us today, Warren, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the shashuka we made. Again, I chose it today because it's a comforting dish.
This meal can be adapted so many different ways, and one of the things, we've got flatbread here, but if you got a day-old bagel or a day-old baguette, slice it up, a little bit of olive oil, toast it. You got crostini.
Absolutely.
Also really good. Some of Mom's homemade bread, whatever the case is.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Warren.
Thank you.